This is Thorin's YouTube channel. Make sure you're tuning in, hitting subscribe.
Right, after this, though, is one of the periods I remember. It's still weird to me. Like, no one's ever really been able to explain this, man. I've asked loads of people in interviews. Because after this is when you not only got Zews as the coach, the guy who'd won the majors with the Brazilians. And by the way, I can tell people definitely, I've talked to this guy loads about CS. He isn't one of those, I won't say mention other names, but he's not one of those coaches who just stands behind like, good job, boys. You know, like, he's actually doing all the tactics and working with everything. And also, you got Stanislaw, who just come off that Optic period where he's won the E-League, and like, that Optic team was fucking good. People remember, like, this was supposed to be like a star lineup. Actually, people thought this lineup was going to be crazy, and all it did really was just underperform. It's never really worked, right? And people will remember later when the results come, was when even though Stan was still there, they swapped to you as the IGL, you took over. What went wrong in the Stanislaw era? What was the problem? Like, on paper, this should have been a great lineup, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think it was just kind of disagreement between like the way that people view the game, specifically Stan and Zeus. Like they didn't really see the game the same way, and then it just eventually spiraled out of control, and it was just like, this guy hates me, I don't like him, kind of thing. And that's exactly why, like it was like if something very small would happen with these guys, like it would be a way bigger problem because of the emotional side of things. So it eventually just snowballed, and I remember I messaged Stan. I was just randomly like up late at night watching like a Navi game on train, and I was like just thinking of the game macro wise, like why is Navi so good on this map? And because I was like the secondary caller at the time, so I was trying to give input and whatnot to Stan, and I was like, yo, I think I could actually try calling, because at the time like Stan was like kind of just checked out, right? Like,
right.
Like he wasn't like really trying to help our team get better. He was just like there, like kind of checked out, and I was like, well, I guess I should try. So I messaged him late on Steam, and I was like, hey, I think I can call like an Navi on this map. It was pretty funny to think about now. And he was like, go for it, kind of thing. And I was like, all right. And that's basically how it happened.
Because then, if people don't remember, the story went like this. I think it was even the time you'd switched, is there was those tournaments like just around the summer. It started with that Mykonos event.
Yeah.
And at the Mykonos event and the New York event afterwards, look, you lost the two events, because in the final, the first one, Mouse had that like ridiculous one where it was like a 5-mapper. And then if people don't remember the ESL New York one, that was the one where FaZe Clan just like dumpstered the entire tournament and like no one could beat them. So like not winning wasn't the end of the world. But the key thing here is you beat the SK team twice, and they were actually the number one team at the time. Like, this is another big result. Like, if this is early on in calling, like, did you get a feel for the role pretty quick? Because I know actually a lot of people don't know this detail. I know like the previous year, I think you'd like briefly done it or something after Dren had gone out of the team. I think everyone had taken a turn, right? I think Hiko took a turn. I think you took a turn. So in theory, this is when you're like committing to doing the role. These are like big results out the gate. Do you think did you have a good grasp on IGLing?
Yeah, I think with the Hiko lineup, I felt like I could contribute more in the fragging department than the macro department. So I was like, I want to delegate this to someone else right now. Like, in my mind, I wasn't ready to become like a leader or a caller at that time, because like I said, I just felt like I could have way more impact in the fragging department. But like eventually in 2017, I was like, I feel like I'm just more mature now, and I feel like I would like to at least give this a shot. When I was first playing Counter-Strike, I never was like, oh, I want to become an IGL. I want to, this is like a calling for me or something.
Sure.
So I just kind of tried it. And then like, obviously I would say the biggest thing for me was having those really good results, beating like at the SK of the world. And I remember Zeus was like literally crying when we beat them, because
it's a big deal for him. Yeah.
Yeah. It was a huge deal for Zeus to beat them. And like, I was like I'm getting goosebumps right now thinking about it. It's just like, it was such a really good feeling for me, and my personal attribute to the team of stepping up in this role and having a really good result to back it up was like huge for me. So ever since then, I just kept on going and building my repertoire of just how teams play, and it's the amount of work that you have to do as an IGL compared to a normal player is tenfold. And I don't think like the community understands that. They just kind of look at the stats and they're like, well, this guy sucks at fragging. Yeah, it's like,
exactly.
I mean, Kerrigan doesn't have the best stats, but look at his trophies, you know,
yes,
like
exactly.
You don't understand how much impact he has within the team. Everyone looks up to him. Every player looks up to him. They respect his calls. There's so much more than just what people see from the outside.
Did you actually understand that yourself? Because I know a lot of people, look, maybe there's someone in your team thinks this right now. A lot of people, when they were the really skilled player and they had like the sick aim and stuff, they think like, yeah, sure, you know, you'll have to put like more thought into the IGLing, but I'll still frag too. Like, did you actually sort of know, like, look, if I do this role full on, like proper IGL, like, I'm essentially going to have to give up my stats. Like, I'm not going to put a pop hammer. It's just not reasonable.
Oh yeah, I 100% knew that was going to be part of it, because even when I was secondary calling, I would find myself looking at minimap too much and not focusing on my crosshair. But like when I play like pugs and stuff, like I'm destroying in pugs because I don't have to focus on like macro stuff. And I instantly realized that tournament, because my stats weren't as good as they were consistently before, but we're winning. So it's like I don't care about stats anymore. It's like I'm here to win, and that's the only thing I'm here to do. Like I don't really care about stats. Like sure, it's a feel good thing, feels good kind of thing. Like personally, like the community's gonna be like, oh yeah, this guy's doing this and that, but it's like also win feels even better in my opinion. So ultimately, that's what I decided was better at the end of the day for me, because I've never been the kind of person to really like have a bad game and I'm just mad,
right?
Because I had a bad game, even if we're winning. Like some people are like that, and I just don't like it. Whereas like I don't know, there's just a lot of hidden impact that the community will never understand. So I understand at the end of the day, and that's the only thing that really matters to me.
Right. I've got a complicated question about Zeus. The reason it's complicated is like this, because on the one hand, I also know, because I talked to him a lot during these times, I know he was doing a lot for the team and he did bring a lot like to the how to play. And if people don't know, it wasn't just these tournaments. His record in general during this era and into the next year was unbelievable against his former teammates. Like when he would play against the Brazilians, man alive, the amount of times he won was mental. And they were still really good. So like, I do know he did bring a lot, but I actually get the feeling like, one, now people have forgotten about him. So I want to know how good was he as a coach and what did he do? But this is where I want you to give me some like separation, is who did what and how much labour was like for each person. Because at the same time, I actually think that's why you got underrated initially, because everyone knew you'd just role swapped. And then because you have Zeus, everyone was thinking it was like, right, he must be like the brainiac. And then he, you know, you're just fucking, the joke would be like, you're just calling it Leash Go Kill or something, you know, like the fucking meme or whatever. Yeah. But obviously both people were doing something. So what was like the partnership like, and what did Zeus bring to Liquid?
Yeah, so Zeus and I had a really good relationship. We're both like laid back. We both are willing to accept criticism, and also just we know how to talk to people. So I think Zeus was definitely the best coach I had, because not only did he bring a lot of like tactical side of things, but he also provided a lot of like ice breaking situations and being able to talk to people if you don't want to have that conversation with them, if you're like kind of introverted. And he also just would help people, like he would suggest things to bring people up and all that. So he was very good at mediating. So I think what separates him from my last coach, or I guess like every coach I've had, is he seemed more of a traditional kind of coach in terms of like sports. So like not only was he helping tactically, but he would also be there if you need to talk to him about like anything in game. So he provided a lot to me as a leader as well, or for me as a leader. And I think he's just really good overall.
Right. Obviously, the big moment after this, because there was a little lull again, was when he got Naf into the team. And people knew by now, because he'd been in that Renegades team where he was basically like carrying them, and he was like the one-man carry, basically. Yeah. People knew he was good. Did you actually, is this the player you wanted? Was he the first choice? When he came in, was it obvious? I mean, if people know the tournaments, you hit the ground running immediately, but did you know it was going to actually work out?
I think initially we wanted Nifty.
That's what he told me. Yeah,
I don't really remember what happened contractually. I think it was like a contract issue or something.
And by the way, to be fair, even though now Nifty became a meme, he was an AWPer back then. And obviously the team in theory didn't need an AWPer. Like, it's actually kind of weird to get Naf and have all riflers, right? So it's not as silly as it sounds now if you're a modern fan.
Yeah, I mean, back then, it was obvious that we needed an AWPer. That was like, that's the whole reason why we wanted Nifty in the first place. And we couldn't get Nifty, so we're like, Naf is here. He's probably like top 5 NA player right now, and he's stuck on Renegades, like with really good stats. He's playing really well, like a star player. And if you look at Naf traditionally, he's not a star player. He doesn't play the positions of a star player. So he has star player stats. So it's like he must be doing something right. So, and obviously we had played with Naf previously, in 2014, I think. And then I think we benched him because he was like he seemed like a lazy kid. He was like kind of had like some attitude problems here and there.
He even
so.
admitted that in his interview. He said like back then it was totally justified that he was benched and stuff. And he said like he matured a lot later, you know.
Yeah. So we definitely knew that he matured a lot because when it's like 4 or 5 years had passed. So we're like, all right, we're not gonna have an AWPer. So we just got to figure out a solution to this. But we do have 5 insanely talented rifles, so we can make this work.
Right. Obviously, the weird thing, another follow-up about NAF is this, because I just did my interview with him, so it's all fresh in my mind, is I knew this behind the scenes, but this would shock a lot of people. Even though this year, immediately when you get him, the results are great, like you're making the finals, it's like everything's getting really good again, right? Famously, he actually, even then I've heard, was like, had some issues in the team or he didn't vibe with people. And there's a story he told me, which is hilarious, where he basically tried to tell like Steve Arnstedt, like one of the owners of Liquid and CEO or whatever, like, yeah, I just want to leave. And so Steve Arnstedt's way of telling him, like, you can't leave. He's like, yeah, sure. It's $1 million buyout, which you have to realize that'd be mental now. But like in 2018, like that's like basically saying you can't leave. Like no one in the world's going to pay that, is it? So, but this would shock people because this is a year where this is one of the best years at the time ever any NA team had. Like, if people don't know, yeah, that year Cloud9 won the Boston Major. That was it. After that, they did nothing. And before that, they were like, all right, you know. Before that, like, basically, it was your major runs were the best ones. So this year was an unbelievable year. What was going on in Liquid that you could be such a good team, but someone wouldn't vibe with it or would want to leave?
I don't know. That's like upon the person, I feel. I don't really... There was never a moment where like I was like, we have to cut this player if we want to keep progressing as a team. It was kind of just like if they have a problem with someone, it just is so over dramatized that people like it's kind of like a sleep on it kind of thing. Or it's like, do you really want to do this, or do you like? There's not many other options for you.
Yes.
Like we are the best team in NA. Do you want to actually do this or not? And I think it was just a very emotional response to a lot of problems that we had instead of because back then we were all younger. And like, obviously when you're younger, you're way more emotional and all that. So I think it was just emotional stuff. And looking back, I don't think if someone actually did leave at that time, they would have regretted, I feel.
Yes. Now, here's one thing about my style of content, if people have ever watched it, that I'm really good at, is, I mean, you could be mean and say, so it seems like I'm never wrong. But if I really like players, like obviously I've done it with all the people like my boys like fucking Alexi B and MSL. I'm really good at finding all the devil's advocate angles of like, yeah, but what about this? Yeah, but he didn't have it. Yeah, but did you check that team did? And if you look, like all the angles, not the most obvious ones. So one thing I had never even thought of myself is what we just mentioned earlier until I went back and looked at your career. It's like, wait a minute. It's one thing when people say, right, Astralis was the best, they're the GOAT team, everyone acknowledges that, the trophy cabinet's too insane, the majors are too insane. We all give them that, right? And yeah, there was other teams who could like one-off beat them, but no one else was getting there as consistently as you. But at the same time, because you lost all the time, everyone just sort of goes, just loses, just wasn't good with it. But then when you add in that detail we mentioned in the device question, wait a minute, you were trying to play a team who, by the way, Device used to win like the MVP every tournament because he was the AWPer. You were trying to play a team with one of the best AWPers ever who wins MVP every tournament. And you not only don't have an AWPer, you have to be the AWPer as the IGL. Yeah. And like you say, on certain maps, like on T-Side, you're just going to play with 5 rifles. Like, that actually implies, if people take all that into context, this actually was one of the best, even this lineup with Taco was one of the best teams ever. To run a team essentially without a pure AWPer, that's really hard in World Cups. Like, I know a lot of IGLs just say, I won't even do it if I don't have a primary.
Yeah. Even like when I was previous iterations of Liquid, wasn't really secondary opping like as much. So the fact that I took up the op was kind of just because I didn't want anyone else to do it on my team because like their main impact in the game is like rifling and entering and trade fragging and stuff. Whereas like I've seen like I remember we were throwing around the op for a little bit. Like Keith was doing it and Russ even tried it. And I'm just like, these guys like they're gonna have so much more impact just being a straight rifler than being like this guy who's just sitting holding an angle with an op because they can out aim like 99% of these people like that are pro. So I was like, well, my rifle's like decent, but like I'm also calling, so like I might as well just pick up the op. And I know people have probably seen like my teammates be like, oh yeah, he doesn't like mid game as much and all this stuff. But like when you're opping, it's pretty hard for me to, or not mid game, but like micro within the mid game.
Yes.
Because I'm opping, I'm not like necessarily with the pack all the time, or I'm just focused on my scope. So I can't really micro people as much as I would like to, which is why you see like the Stewie people are saying like, oh yeah, Stewie's like really good at micro, because Stewie was the one creating the space and the zones that we needed him to do, and he's also telling his teammates next to him what he wants to do, and then he has like good suggestions in the mid round. Same with you, Kinder. So it's just kind of like the style that I kind of developed because of my opping in the game. It's just like I'm not really with the pack as much as I probably should have been looking back, because I'm not there to actually see what's going on and be able to micro the players around me that I want to, because I was never like that aggressive IGL, you know. I wasn't the zone taker like you see like the Nafany and stuff, Hampus. Like they're the ones kind of taking the zones and telling their teammates what they want to, or what he wants around them, basically. So I think that's kind of why the meta kind of shifted to more aggressive IGLs.
Sure. Right. The other thing as well about this time period is, as I mentioned, everyone forgets this is obviously the year when you had Taco, which was another big deal. Not just have Zeus, but you have Taco. And if people forget, this is almost like he had a renaissance of his career. Like, there's a reason why. People always forget that detail as well. Some people think like Liquid kicked them and then they got Stewie. It's the other way around. Like, they wanted to go back to playing SK, and then Stewie was just available because he was in that team at the time. So at the time, like, I've heard like Taco says he has a great time in this team. It sounds like he fit the team really well, right?
Yeah, Taco is a man. Like we all enjoyed having him around. He's super laid back. He's really fun to be around. Yeah, so Taco was super selfless. I think I learned a lot from him based on like his experience within SK. Obviously, they were the best team in the world, and we had never been the best team in the world. So he brought that valuable experience that you can only get within, like, you know, being on the #1 team in the world for a while. So overall, we learned so much from Taco and Zeus as well, since they both had that XP. And obviously we were probably the second best team in the world, so we had pretty good results, you know, that year, like looking back. So 2019 like was obviously like our best year, but 2018 was right behind
Still
it.
really
It's
good,
a super good year for us. Yeah, like Astralis was just dominating us. So it just looks like it was a bad year for us because we weren't #1. But yeah, at the end of the day, Zeus and Taco wanted to go and make another team full of Brazilians, and we respected it. You know, we can't really be like, no, we want you to stay, but at the end of the day, like, we respect your decision. So that's ultimately what happened.
Right. There was one moment where, again, this is where you have to remember history like I do to know this. At the FACEIT London Major, which was actually the first major that they won, this was the one where in the group stage, you guys beat them. And the hype if people don't know this, a bunch of the analysts were actually saying Liquid was going to win this major, because the hype was that in scrims, you were also like tearing the major, tearing up all the teams, and you were going to be super sick. And I think if people remember, just before this, they'd lost that dream hack to like MSL's North team. So this was the moment where people actually thought maybe it turns around though. Maybe now Liquid can win the major. Do you remember this one? Because I remember even your game against the major was like, it was whatever, but like this was a chance, right?
Which major was this? The FACEIT major?
FACEIT one, yes.
2018?
Yes.
I don't really remember this major as much for some reason. Honestly, I don't really remember this major for some reason. It's like a blank in my mind.
Fair enough. Right, what about, one thing I always did wonder about is, look, there was the ESL New York one where obviously you lost to the mouse spots people. But aside from that, right, the other thing that's brutal about this era, mate, is, like I said, they would occasionally lose to someone. But somehow you always had to beat them in the final. Like, if people don't know, the dream for you would basically have been, like, Na'Vi beats them, because Na'Vi could, or, you know, or FaZe or something, and you would always beat Na'Vi and FaZe. Like, there was also a world where you didn't have to beat Astralis. Like, if you could have just played one of these, if one of those teams took care of them in the other semi, basically, and you just play them, you probably get some titles already, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually crazy to think about, like, how we played so well versus every other team besides Astralis. And I think once we lost like a certain amount of times versus Astralis, we definitely had like a mental block, and we started not playing our own game versus them, trying to do different things, like even like trying to prepare differently. One time we actually played their perma veto or our perma veto and beat them, which is crazy to think about. But we tried a lot of things. So from the outside, it's like, oh, look, they're just playing Nuke again. You know, they're gonna get demolished, and we did get demolished. So it's like, looking back, we probably should have tried even like more extreme things. Because they just had our number, and it's really sad to think about it for our side of things. But even going back, like, I don't even know what the correct solution would be, like even if I've had all this time to think about it, it's like, what could we have possibly done differently to beat this team?
I mean, I'll just give you some context. Like, first of all, people do forget, right? Some of these games, especially, we now know in hindsight that Astralis was the GO.A.T. They weren't the GO.A.Ts yet. This is the first major they won that FACEIT one, and then they're winning the first lands. And yeah, they're really good. They're number one. But at the time, you're the top team as well. You're there. And then secondly, for the veto, like, if people don't know, your team was really good on Inferno too. Like, of course you want to play that map. Like, it doesn't matter that it's their best map. This is something fans don't understand about vetoes. You don't really just look at the other team's win percentage and go, right, ban their best map or like whatever. You play your maps as well. You play the ones you're confident on, that you learn the spots. And then on the nuke one, actually, it was Astralis that basically ruined your win rate on that map. Like, against other teams, you can win on that map.
Yeah.
Like, I always thought this was all those ones where, yeah, later, once you've done it enough times, like you say, you got to experiment then if the same thing keeps happening. But early on, that's not really the way you IGL and veto as a coach in IGL, right? You, to some degree, you have to get the strong maps for you as well. And sometimes if it's another good team, you just go, right, we'll try and beat them.
Yeah, I mean, every single team, like, I go on HLTV, I look at their vetoes, like previous matches, and then I look at their map win percentage, and I'm like, oh, well, their map is our best map. So then I'm like, what's our second best map? Is that their second best map as well? Sometimes it just matches up really well, and you have similar map pools. Like, even against Astralis, like, Nuke, I think we're the second best team on Nuke in the world.
Could have been, yeah.
Which is why we kept playing. We were beating every other team on it, so it's like we're good on it. It's like we just need to figure out a way to beat them. Which anti-shredding, we tried really prep, we tried no prep. Like, we tried a bunch of things. So I think we're the second best team. We had a super strong Inferno. Oh, they had a super strong Inferno as well. So like, what did we pick? Oh, we picked Mirage. We beat them on Mirage. Oh, they start perma veto Mirage. So it's like, or like, their worst map gets removed conveniently, so then it makes us even weaker versus them.
Yep.
So
and then the last angle was, like you said, you eventually, when you had to try something, you did go and play train. But the reason it's logically you didn't play train is you didn't have a superstar AWPer. That's, if people don't know, that's a classic AWP map. You're going to have the AWPer CT side, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, you definitely need a very strong AWPer on train. It's just like you need a lot of aggressive AWPer to get those opening picks, or just, you know, someone holding a good line will consistently be able to hit the shot, like, to get the entry. So yeah, I mean, it's funny because that was actually Zews's idea to play train, but like Keith was always like kind of the voice in the back that he would say, like, suggest things, and like sometimes they like wouldn't go through because he was just so laid back. But he would always be like he always talks about, he's like, man, looking back, it's so stupid that we didn't like start playing train against Astralis. But it's like, yeah, I agree to a certain extent, but we were also like the second best team in the world with our current map pool. So it's just like, it's such a weird time period for us where it's like, do we start playing a map where we're going to be weaker on? We might lose to like weaker teams in the beginning, but ultimately, like 3 months on the road, we'll be able to play Astralis on it and hopefully win that map. Or are we going to do that and they're going to start putting more time in the train and then beat us on train as well? You know what I mean? So there's just a lot of like ambiguity going into playing against them, because they were definitely in our heads at the time, and it's pretty apparent.
By the way, do you actually, because I know, like, that's another thing. There's so many times I had like breakfast with Zeus at an event where it was like, right, what could you do differently this time? Like, what in the game could you try differently, or what did you see last? And the problem, but if people don't know, I've always thought so underrated about the Astralis team, is this is where fans really do think it's like a static game. And once you're the best, you're the best. You're never not the best. And then once you can't win, what they don't get is like every tournament, you're tweaking something in your playbook. And I always thought the amazing thing about them was, even when they won, they would tweak. You know, sometimes people get on top and like you have to beat them before this right bit of overhaul. It's like they always came with something new, right? Like, what was it actually like to play? Like, what was their style, do you think? Did they have like, was it possible to prepare for them? Was it possible to try and anti them?
The thing is, like, you can anti them and you know what's coming and you still lose. So it's like,
right, okay.
That's what was happening a lot to us. And it's funny because like all the other teams would literally download the Astralis simas and then do exactly what Astralis says. So they were like defying the meta as they were winning.
Yes.
And they would be a step ahead because all the other teams were doing what they were doing before. And we understood that as well. So it was just a matter of like, can we beat their current game in the moment? And a lot of times we couldn't, obviously.
Right, the one tournament I referenced it earlier, but I have to ask about it because the one that really did hurt my soul is because you have to understand, like I already loved this Team Liquid lineup. Like they were playing awesome. You're so many times second. So when I heard that ESL New York, because they were like, people know the relationship with Blast at the time. They went to that Blast Istanbul or whatever, which was like whatever, and all the other good teams went here. And then your team was in the final, and somehow you're playing Mouse Sports, which at the time had bombed the major. And it's like, bro, it's no Astralis. Like, this is the time. Like, it's basically like the coronation. You guys were up 2 maps to 1. On the 4th map, I remember you were like up big, and it's like everyone was almost waiting in this arena. Like, no, that was the 5th map that you did that one. But I remember you were up big on the 4th map as well. It was like everyone was just waiting. Like, right, you're gonna win the game. To lose this must have fucking hurt your soul, mate.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that was. It just sucks, man. Because looking back, it's like that was like our tournament, and we knew that like Astralis were like our demons at the time, and the fact that we barely lost that one too, then we started thinking like, what's going on in our heads? Like we should be winning these games. Like even if Astralis isn't here, we lost like in a similar fashion as if we were playing them, and I don't know. It's just so hard to dissect what was going wrong exactly. We just couldn't close out the games, and obviously like we're kind of known for choking, and I feel like you said earlier, it was like if you're already in your own head, then you already lost, you know. So
did you do that thing? Because a lot of people, if you notice, initially, if people say you choke or whatever, normally people start out by just denying it. Like, no, it was just a bad game. Or, you know, like, oh, that guy had like a pop-off game, whatever. Was there a point where you sort of like had a realization of like, we sort of do choke specifically against that one team, unfortunately?
There was, I forgot what tournament it was. We were playing Mouse Sports. Maybe it might have been this tournament. Was it Dust 2?
Yeah.
Map?
The 4th map, yeah.
This is yeah. So I remember thinking like we were up a lot, and I was like, I'll never forget. I was getting really nervous for some reason, and like I was experienced at the time, and I remember I was like, because I was in my own head, right, like about the choking thing, like you said, like once I started thinking about it, and then because like once you're like that close to a victory, your brain starts like what if, like a lot of what if questions and all that. So I remember I started thinking this, and then I actually started working on a sports psych like after that, and I told him like what happened, all that, and like we tried to fix it, blah blah blah. But that's the future. But I remember at this moment I started feeling really nervous and like trying to figure out what's going on in my brain, and I was just thinking about like too many external factors on that Dust 2 match, and we just started going back to defaulting. Like when you're nervous, you instinctively want to just do a default, like a safe round, right? So like like a Dust 2, like a 2 guys lower B, 1 guy top mid, 1 guy holding long, etc. Your ops T spawn. I started calling like that. So I think a lot of that was actually on me personally. Like that particular series where I started thinking about too many external factors, and a lot of people won't even admit what I'm admitting, but I don't know why I felt that at that moment. It was such a bad feeling too, especially since we lost.
Sure. Right. What about after this? Obviously, like the story we said before, the Taco and Zeus went back to SK, and then in came Stewie. Right. When you first brought Stewie in, like you said, then it actually ended up being awesome because you sort of had like a division of labourers like IGLs, and then you could like AWPer, and then he was in the entry pack, and obviously people know his whole style is to go in first and just go through a smoke and go balls to the water. So it ended up being awesome. Did you actually know when he first came in? Like, was he a player you had a good relationship with? Did you know it was going to work out in the team? Did you wonder how will we figure out all out, etc.?
No, we knew like of him from like streaming personality and just like seeing him at tournaments here and there, but we didn't really know him as a person or player. We knew him as a player, obviously playing against him, but as a person, we didn't really know him. So I'll never forget. We had the conversation with Zeus and Taco at what's that tournament in Denmark? The Pro League.
Oh yeah,
I think it was.
Pro League Audience, the one at the end of the year. Yeah.
Yeah. So we all got together at a table, and it's like our whole team with Zeus and Taco, and they're like, look, like we're gonna leave the team, we're gonna do this and that. So like, oh shit, like we got to figure this out. So Cloud9 was at that tournament, and we're like talking about like who we think we should get, like who fits that role, and we're like, we ultimately came down to either Taco or not Taco, Tarek or Stewie. And I remember we DM'd them, we're like, yo, like come to this hotel room, we're gonna kind of do like a mini interview with you. And we didn't really like what Tarek said. Like I forgot. I don't want to really go into too much detail of what he said, but Stewie felt like he was there to win, and we really respected that. And ultimately, we chose Stewie. And it was nice because we felt like he had more of a dominant personality where he can help me because I'm more laid back, and it's nice to kind of have that balance of power within the team. So ultimately, we chose Stewie, and then we just got things going like right after that, and then our first tournament was IEM in January.
Yes. By the way, what was, even though obviously people know it was a little bit of a scuffed event, what was the moment like when you actually beat Astralis then in that final?
That was like one of the best feelings, even though it was like a smaller event, like an iBUYPOWER event, just in LA or whatever. It was such a good feeling because we had like this new player and we beat Astralis. So it's like, are we gonna continue to beat them, or was this like a one-time thing kind of thing? You know, like maybe getting Stewie was like the step that we needed to beat them, like the hump, like we overcame our demons and got Stewie, and now we can consistently be like the best team in the world. So yeah, it was definitely an amazing feeling for everyone on the team.
Right, I remember that New York event was one of the famous ones where, this is brutal, but it's true, because Twistzz just popped off so hard. It was one of the few times they actually did do the HLTV thing where he got the award for MVP, even though he lost, which tells you how hard he fragged as a rifler. And I know this was the era when he actually became like a real star player, because obviously before that, like, Naf was really good, Elise was always good. This was when he really started to like come into his own, right? People might know now in FaZe when he's won 1 million trophies, but I actually personally... Obviously, you can debate this. I think he was better in Liquid, mate. I think in Liquid was when he was like his ultimate peak. Like, if people forget, like, I even remember saying back then, because everyone back then still treated like NA players like second class compared to Europeans. I was like, dude, I think this guy's actually probably mechanically better than most Europeans. Like, yeah, maybe we'll take like, I don't know, Simple, Nico. Yeah, they're the GOATs, mate. But like, aside from that, like, Twistzz could frag anyone, right?
Yeah, I think Russ definitely had the best mechanics out of any NA player. Just watching him play, and even playing against, I remember playing against him on Misfits. I was like, this kid's different. Like, he's not like the typical like FPL player that just has like a round out of every 100 rounds, like a decent round. This kid is like, he understands. He has really high intuition, and he also has like really raw mechanics. And I remember John and I were watching when we picked up Twistzz, we were watching his demos, and he was on Cobble, and he was the long B anchor, and his he was like towards like the broken wall area, and then once his drop player got picked, somehow I forgot how he got picked, but he had the intuition to just move over towards drop and fill in that gap instead of just staying along B and playing for two different areas. He kind of just he gave long B and went towards drop, and to me that was like a very high intuitive play that most players actually don't do. So like I'll never forget this one moment that I was like, this kid like he's a real deal. He's really good, and his first bullet accuracy is so high. So just from playing against him, like you peek a corner, he just instantly headshots you. It's like, damn, like this kid has it. So we got Twistzz, and like I don't know, I still think to this day he is like top 3 mechanical players in CS.
One question I have is this. Obviously, one of the ones no one likes to remember is that IEM Katowice tournament, because the sad thing is this, because ENCE went to the final and then became really good, everyone's like, oh, I remember ENCE. It's like, ENCE wasn't even supposed to be in the semi-final. This was supposed to be Team Liquid all day. Like, this is one where you look at this line and it's like, this is another one where I heard behind the scenes, like, oh, they're doing mega in scrims, like the boot camp's going awesome, like they could win this major, like people were hyped. Obviously, you've beaten Astralis at the iBUYPOWER line, like everything's lining up in theory. And you look at the bracket, look, this is where fans will never also get. No one consciously goes, yeah, I'm not going to try against this opponent. But what happens is you look at the bracket and you just sort of think like, right, yeah, we should probably win this game. Or then we play Na'Vi in the semis. Or then, you know, maybe we meet Astralis in the final. Like, even better, you don't have to play them on your side of the bracket. Like, I've heard basically you guys did sort of just like overlook ENCE. Is it true?
Yeah, I think we definitely underestimated them for sure. Because like previously they hadn't really done anything, and like obviously we, you know, have been like a top 2 team the previous like year or so. So we definitely underestimated them. We didn't really we prepared the same exact way, but I don't know, it's just I think they also played pretty well. Was that the AUG? That was the AUG meta, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so they were really good on the CT side. Their CT sides were carrying them so hard because they had super good AUG players, I remember. And I think we got kind of caught off guard against that style that they had. Because they were actually like they would just sit in sites. They weren't really aggressive on their CT sides, and they would just kind of like anchor their sights with two people. Like for example, on Mirage, they would just play like one guy bench and one guy just like by the van, but just holding cow zoomed in with an AUG, and we go up cat and he just like kills two of us instantly. So it's like, well, I mean, what can you do? The gun's like just so broken. So I think they kind of abused it, which every team was pretty much doing, but they were really good with the AUG, and I think it kind of caught us off guard.
The saddest thing about that as well is if people know the story later on, like you had like the close Dallas final against them, but then you had that like Chicago one later where you just beat the absolute dog shit out of them. Like, like when you actually played them later and you knew they were legit, you could beat them. Like it always just makes me wonder, like, what if you could have won this match?
Yeah, I never thought they were like better than us. Like after that, like sure they beat us, but like I still had like full belief in my team that we were like still a better team, and you could just see like in the future that we just kept up that consistency, even though we lost some like big matches here and there. Like we were pretty consistent playoff teams pretty much the whole entire time.
Yes, right. Obviously, when you guys started winning, right, even though you win a massive tournament, this is one thing I've always thought is really unfair, right? Is, you know, when people do that thing like, oh, but Astralis wasn't there. Like, first of all, they chose not to attend, guys. And not only did they choose not to attend, because all they played was those stupid fucking blasts where you play like 5 best of ones. You could see it degraded their level. Like, they chose to do that. Like, no one made them do it. No one had a gun to their head. I get that they were by the way, they were probably a bit burned out from all the fucking million tournaments they won. I get that. But like, I always thought this part, the reason why that's so stupid is like, if they don't attend, you can only beat who you play. And so if you beat them and you're the only ones winning the tournaments, you are sort of number one if you win the tournaments. Like they have to come back and beat you. That's the way it works in CS, guys. Like, spoiler, if one of them had retired, we wouldn't be going like, yeah, but what if that team still played now? Like, they don't. You can only play the lineups that are there. So when you first won those events, did you actually yourself let yourself enjoy it? Like, we're actually winning big because if people don't know, these were huge events as well. Like that one in Sydney, it's like the Kudos Arena. When you win like Dallas, like that's a fucking banger place. Yeah, Pro League might not seem as big. Dude, that was the Pro League in France, the one where it was like fucking all the French crowd would go crazy for G2. Like, these are pretty cool events to win.
No, yeah, I remember just going back to like that Mouse Sports loss when I felt that like overwhelming pressure of external factors, like, oh, are we actually going to do this? We're so close kind of thing. I feel like I worked really hard on myself. So once we got to that Sydney final against Fnatic, it just felt so easy. Like, it just felt like I felt like a new team, and I felt this like overwhelming sense of confidence that like this is finally it. We're finally gonna do it, and I don't know what happens after this. Like, I'm just focusing on this one game at a time or one map at a time, and winning that tournament was such an over-exhilarating feeling for my team and I that we just carried the confidence on and on and on and on. That's why we won so many tournaments. Like, we finally overcame it, and once you overcome that, it's just like another day in the office, honestly.
Did it actually have the effect? Because, like, as you said, like, the New York one obviously is the one that got to everyone. Because before that, you could always just say, what's Astralis? Like, not my fault they're there. But when you lose the New York one, people might start to think, like, shit, is it me? Like, am I actually fucked up? Do I just pressure get to me? When you win, does it kind of like, I mean, did you think that, like you said, did you think you'd made progress? Does it actually feel like, oh, I was too harsh on myself?
Yeah, kind of. But it's like, I remember when we won the Sydney final, obviously there was a lot of fans who were like tweeting at you, sending you DMs like, oh, Astralis wasn't there. But it's like, yeah, but we beat every other team again. Like, we still won what's in front of us. So like, in the back of our minds, we understood that, yeah, Astralis wasn't there. It would have been a way harder tournament if they were there, obviously, right? But there's no point even thinking about that because they weren't there. And it's not our fault that they're not there.
Yes.
You know, so even winning a tournament, feeling that that feeling of just lifting the trophy at the end of this week and a half long tournament was just like a huge confidence builder for us. And there was always that thing in the back of your mind where it's like, what if they were here? You know? But it's like, it doesn't really matter. There's no point in even thinking about it.
Yes. And I'll just throw this out there. That's where people just take for granted how great the greatest teams ever are. That's because the year before, Astralis made you guys really think they could just win every single fucking tournament they ever played. Even the greatest teams drop a tournament here and there. Like, for all we know, maybe they go to these lands and someone beats them in the quarters, or someone like maybe Nico has a pop off on FaZe and they win a game. You know what I mean? It can happen. Like, people, that's the problem. Because they weren't there, they just automatically get to they get the imaginary first place, and you get like a real second place for winning. Like, it doesn't work like that, guys. guys. That's unfair. So then here's the key thing. Obviously, you got to have the grudge match. So you played them in the Pro League. Everyone deletes that. Yeah. Everyone tells the story like they just skipped all the events till the major, and then they beat them. No, they didn't. No, they didn't. They went to Pro League. They played you, and you had that insane comeback on Vertigo where you did the T-side and just close out, right? That was fucking gangster way to win as well, T-side Vertigo.
I think at that moment we realized that we were the best team in the world. Because like you said, every tournament that they weren't at, there was an asterisk next to our win.
Yep. But
this tournament, we did it. We beat them. We won the tournament. Like all the other teams are like whatever to us at this moment because like everyone is focused on Astralis at that time because they were just so dominant that if they lose a match, or if they get knocked out of a tournament by any team, whoever wins that tournament, there's an asterisk next to it, like you said. So we actually did it ourselves. We took matters into our own hand, beat them, won the tournament, and at that moment we were like, all right, we're the best team in the world. We feel it.
Right, when you actually went, and then the key one obviously was ESL One Cologne, because it even still has the same vibe now. Obviously, it wasn't a major like years before, but basically, when you get the two majors, obviously everyone wants to win the major, but the next tournament after that is kind of ENCE Cologne. Those are just that's why I call those the prestige tournaments. Everyone wants that on their resume. I mean, spoiler, actually, if people don't know, Astralis never got it. Just throwing that out there. Look, they won fucking everything else, so I have to give them some fucking razz on something, don't I? So, right? And to win this one, obviously, was going to get the Grand Slam, which at the time, no one's ever done the Grand Slam in the 4 in a row. Everyone loses one and then comes back, and are they going to do it, aren't they? Right? Obviously, in this one, famously, they didn't get to the final. They could have beaten Vitality and played you in the final. They didn't get to. Zews was going ham, right? To win this one, I mean, people can remember probably it's one of the most iconic wins where Stewie gets on the desk, tries to do the Michael Jordan or whatever and all that shit. But this is pretty sick to win the Grand Slam. So you win the million, you win the fucking accomplishment, and you do it at Cologne. That has to be. I mean, it's obviously a career highlight, right?
Oh yeah, it's definitely the highlight of all of our careers for sure. Probably in our lives to a certain extent. It just felt like it was like a story, actually. It felt like fake. I don't know how to explain it. It was too good to be true.
Yes.
It was like, man, you're winning the Grand Slam and the best time pot, 63 days or whatever it was. So it's like an accomplishment in itself. You're winning all this money. You're winning a Cologne, which is, like you said, one of the most prestigious tournaments, probably if not the most prestigious that there is. And all the crowd is your back. So it's everything kind of just came together for us at that moment. And then it was kind of a matter of just, what's the next step? How do we maintain this? How do we maintain being the best team in the world? Astralis did it for this long, so we can try it. We never been here before. We got to brainstorm our, how do we do it? Do we go back to a drawing board and make new strats or figure out little kinks and stuff that we can do within our strat book to make sure these teams aren't just anti-stratting us now, because everyone's going to start watching us now, because we're the best team. And then the player break happened, so we had a long break after that, felt like.
Right, I obviously have a few questions about before the major part, but one question, look, it's an obvious one and it is a bullshit question, but you have to ask it, right? Everyone knows, if you go and look, all the top teams played worse after that player break. I always say it's like Astralis played themselves into form at that tournament. Even they looked a bit sus in the Swiss system and stuff. Realistically, if that major happens before the player break, look, we can't guarantee Liquid wins. Maybe Astralis does also. Maybe they are clutch at major. I don't know. But it's obviously the question everyone wishes to renew now. Now we all wish the player break didn't happen right before major, right?
Yeah. Always a what if, I think the player break kind of, because we were traveling so much that we didn't, because we were back to back tournaments.
Yes.
Because we wanted to skip Cologne. I don't know if you remember.
Yep.
We actually did skip it, and then we went to the open qualifier, or I don't remember exactly, close qualifier. We almost actually lost to fours in that, or we might have lost. I don't remember exactly. I think we almost lost and got knocked out. Yeah. So we barely even made Cologne during that period, which is crazy because our online performances were so much worse than our lane performances for some reason, but that's not our topic. But yeah, I remember for the player break, since we were traveling so much, people on the team had a lot of personal things they needed to handle, and it was probably there was so much to handle for certain people that they didn't really focus on the game at the time, because they had to focus on their real life stuff, their personal lives and all that. So I think everyone kind of just took a break from playing, and it kind of just affected us a lot.
Right, I want to ask about this era because this is the one where if people remember, it did go into a couple of series in like Swiss system at the major as well. But this is also where you had that bonkers streak because you just really were never losing. You had a 22 series win streak. Now, if people don't know, even Astralis hasn't done that. The only team that ever did more was the original NIP that just never lost to anyone ever, basically. And so, like at the beginning of the game, like a billion years ago when dinosaurs ruled the earth or whatever, like to go 22 series in a row is like impossible. Like I know there was, obviously there'd be the odd time where he came close to losing, but what sort of mind state? What like people know like the terms like flow state, right? If you're in that scenario, you just never lose. What's it like to just never lose, basically, for that many matches?
It was an awesome feeling. It's like we all work so hard, and it's like all of our goals and dreams to become the best team in the world. And the fact that it was like actually happening was like it felt like surreal being there in the moment. It was like way too high of a high, if that makes sense for all of us. And I'm pretty sure any team any player who's been in that position knows what I'm talking about. It's like, all right, we're finally, we did it. Now what? Like, what's the next step? I think that's where we ultimately failed as a team to take that next step and take the next leap into whatever we need to do to become like the GOAT team. You can have like the best team in the world, but like, what do you do to become the GOAT kind of team and make that legacy? So I think that's ultimately where we failed. And honestly, it was just pretty bad timing with like the player break and stuff. It just screwed us.
Right, I've got a few questions because unsurprisingly, when you're in that many series, your map pool is going to get pretty fucking good. So let me ask about some of the best maps of Liquid, and maybe you can give me a sense of like how did you play? Because again, as people will know, we said earlier, you're still the AWPer, and even then, you don't always AWP all sides of every map all the time. It depends what the scenario is. And I remember back then, even one of the things about Liquid I remember off the top of my head was because earlier everyone did copy the Astralis stats, like, oh, it's all util, and we're all trying to. I remember this team because you had so many fucking amazing riflers. Sometimes you could even play like with minimal util. You could just like run in basically, or like dry contact. Like if you look at the maps that you were the best on, your actual best maps were like Dust 2, Overpass, Inferno. Now, if people think about it, that's the whole gamut right there. Like you got Overpass, like the tactical map, super long range, you got to know the rotations. Inferno's like right in the middle. You got to be both good on both sides of the game. And then Dust 2 was the one where it's like, if you got fraggers, fucking turn them loose. Like, let's just frag out. Give me some sense, like, how did Liquid play at this time?
I think we were so good because we like, aside from like just us meshing well as teammates, we also had like super good talent, like everyone sees. I felt like we were super good at just identifying what they were doing on their CT sides, like what setups we think they're doing. We had a lot of voices, a lot of people suggesting what they think is happening, feeding information to me, and then ultimately like us creating a plan. But we were super good at just defaulting and punishing aggression. I think those are our biggest strengths as a team, because we had such good aim. We could punish specific aggression, get into the clutch. And then once we get to that 4v4, we just had such a high win percentage of winning the 4v4s and 4v3s, 3v4s, even sometimes 5v4s. It was even hard for AWPers to kill my riflers. Like, even though I would only AWP on T side on overpass because it's pretty needed in a T side, or at least back then it was needed in a T side default to just find those like the zones, like run boost long on overpass, for example. You need someone to post up in the really far angle, and then he can take the deep angle to SWAT from long. So like that was like pretty much, and Dust 2 as well, but I think Stu was opting on Dust 2.
Okay.
So Dust 2 and Overpass are two really good op maps. So going back to the question, I think what made us good on those maps was just our ability to dissect what the CTs are doing in that round, punishing aggression, and winning the clutches.
Because they're like a random detail. I might even be the one who brought this up. I remember just like running the numbers like, wait, what? Because you were winning all these matches. I remember because those were like the 3 really good maps. You were always picking that. You never were picking Mirage. Other people would pick it or be third map. But on that, you had like a 15 map win streak. No one even noticed though, because the joke is everyone was focused on winning the tournament, winning these. Like no one even really noticed. You were actually low key, like cracked out on Mirage too.
Yeah, I remember when we first realized that we were on like a 12 map win streak on Mirage, and we're just like, should we be picking this map? Like kind of thing. Because we would always pick like the thing about our map pool is like it was so strong that we could always pick the opponent's weakness.
Yes.
Because So we would always just go for like the Infernos, overpasses, sometimes Dust 2, Nuke. We wouldn't really pick as much because I don't know why, we didn't really have to pick it, I guess. So just in general, like people would try to pick a map on us and we'd beat them on it, like Mirage, for example. And we didn't really have a weak map, so to speak. So it's pretty hard to play against us, I think.
It's also why, like I said earlier, even from the lineup in the 2018 one, that's also why if Liquid ever had actually like won the major and be like a GOAT type team, it would have been like so unique because almost no one ever really did it without the dominant, or maybe like Nip back way back in the fucking days. But again, that was a very, very different game back then. Because you look at it, like the other thing as well about your team was it had that quality that makes you almost unbeatable, where even if you lose the guns, you had the nastiest fucking deagles like maybe ever for a team like that. People don't realize, I used to say at the time, but like I think that team for real, man for man, might be the most skilled team to ever play CSGO. Yes, it didn't win the major. We know that, fans. I'm just talking about like the skill level of the players. Like you said, it didn't even have to be one player pop off. Everyone could pop off. Everyone can outshoot the enemy, right?
Yeah, that was like one of our strengths as a team for sure. Like this goes back to like within the default, these teams, like we're super good at punishing aggression because we have such good aim and such good ability to just. I think at the time, like our trading was like really high. It kind of reminds me of like Heroic nowadays, which I think is why like Cadian's not like he's a really good AWPer, but he's not like a star, device or simple even. But he's really solid fundamentally. He reminds me of like myself back then. Like when I was opping, I wasn't like the guy that's gonna push squeaky door and get like a 4K like zews or something. I'm gonna be like outside trying to kill people for their mistakes that they're making, right? Similar to Katie and how he plays the game. And I think Heroic is really good nowadays because their trading is so high. They have like the highest trading by far out of any team right now in CSGO, which is what I think carries them to their results that they have recently, at least.
No, I mean, that's actually talked a bit about this because that's an underrated aspect of CSGO if you're a casual fan, right? Everyone wants to see like the superhero Carrigan call, or they want to see like the round where, the tactics are genius and this happens here and you distract them out. The most fundamental T-side concept in the history of Counter-Strike is to trade frag, is to get properly set it up so that even if this guy dies, you instantly trade back. If people don't know, there's a concept in CSGO where if CTs have an even number of people and you trade, it's worse for the CTs because they're more spread out. There can't be as many people in the site. Like, essentially, this one concept is like it's the ultimate way to win CS, right?
Yeah, people would think like if you're like, it's just basics to understand. The CTs have to cover, like these choke points. And if there's less bodies to cover those choke points, then the Ts can be in one place altogether versus a one CT and a 4v4 exactly. So it's like the trading is super important, and 4v4s are always going to be T-sided on any map ever in the history of FPS gaming. So like trading is so essential to the fundamentals of Counter-Strike, and being in a 4v4 is a lot easier than being in a 5v5.
Right, when you had this era where you won all these times and you got the series in a row and you win in Cologne and the Grand Slam and all stuff, were you a guy where, because I always thought actually it's another thing I pointed out recently, and the thing that's really underrated about 2018 is, dude, I've seen a lot of teams that go like second or a couple of seconds in a tournament, and because they lose, like your morale gets crushed, and then you come back next time and you don't even make the final, now you go out in the quarters or someone beats you. To actually just keep coming back and back and back and keep going to the final, that takes a lot of mental resilience, even though the team was supposed to be chokers. And then to actually keep going for a whole year losing, and then the next year, again, a lot of people would just eventually think like, it's just like I'm never going to beat them, or we're never going to win, or it's actually really easy to get dispirited when you're someone who's a lot of people, if you don't know fans, like base their identity, their confidence on if they win the tournament, if they had a big key loss, that can rattle them. Were you a guy, did you always think it was possible? Was it always possible to work towards becoming the best team?
I think my team had a lot of resilience, and they had a lot of hunger to win. And when you're that close, it's either you keep on going or you just give up. And like my team always wanted to just keep on going, and we knew that we were so close to being that best team if we could just overcome whatever it is that we need to overcome. We realized how close we were because we had so many second place finishes. It's like, okay, maybe there's a tournament where like this team doesn't go to, we can win this one. Oh, we didn't win that one. Like what's next? Like we got to keep going. We can't just give up. Otherwise, we'll look like failures, and we'll look dumb if we just try to make changes because we're coming in second place. Second place is is good. It's not bad for sure. Like it's a close that you could beat of winning the tournament. So we understood that in our heads, and we just kept on going. We believed that we could be that best team, even throughout like 2017, 2018.
Right, you're not a guy who ever, even though you do interviews, you never like bragged or said like, I'm fucking the best IGL or whatever. But as a result, especially from the 2018 one, because that was even less about just like people fragging out, I always feel like you don't really get any credit as an IGL. Like everyone just acts like you were just fucking there, and then they all just shot everyone. Like you were a pretty good IGL at the time, right? I mean, you in theory, if everyone thinks Glaive's the GOAT, you were right behind him at the time.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it doesn't really matter to me. It's just like, yeah, I did have a lot of skill, but we also were up to date with all the current meta strats. Like we had all these things in our strat book. It's just a matter of like manipulating the enemy and calling the correct strat, which is where I come in, and then also like being able to just outread your opponent. And there's a lot of hidden impacts within a team, in terms of like who's doing the prep, who's taking the extra time out of their day to, create strats, who's studying the game. You got to be really studious as an IGL. You can't just expect to, I want to IGL one day and then be like a top tier IGL. Like it takes a lot of time, and it's something that you have to understand going in. So when I see people are like, oh, well, he was only good because he had Twistzz killing everyone. It's like, yeah, it's part of it, sure, but what happens when he's not killing? Then what? So there's a lot of just fans are going to be fans sometimes, and I understand that at the end of the day. I don't like to brag about stuff because it just doesn't. It's not something that really intrigues me as a person. So I like to just like even nowadays, like people are calling me washed and all this stuff. I'm just
Okay.
like, well, let me try to prove you wrong within my gameplay. I'm not going to sit there and say, oh, I'm not washed. Like that's not going to sway your opinion. So if I say, oh, well, my team is doing really good because my calls are really good, they're going to just be like, no, and then they're going to go back to their first opinion that they have, right? So it's pointless to even have that argument, in my opinion.
Because the other thing to me that proves that like you had to be a good IGL at this time is like it's not like the game is only in 2018 just play Astralis only. Like we said, you had to beat all the other teams. You had to beat MIBR and FaZe Clan and Na'Vi and all these teams out there. And then obviously the next year you have to beat Vitality with zews, and you have to beat ENCE, it was on a heater when they had the org meta, and you have to beat fucking everyone. NRG was pretty good if people remember. They were always in the semis, etc. Right? One question I do have is another thing I feel like game plan has to be underrated. It's the sheer amount of times that your teams beat Simple. This is when he's the GOAT. This is when we're all just giving him those bloody awards every year. Just going, you are just the GOAT. In fact, if you just even make the final, mate, you just get the MVP automatically. It's just yours. You don't even have to win, right? When you play against someone like that, it's not like you just played against him and you just missed every shot. Like you obviously were game planning against him. You had an idea. What do you think the secret back then was? What did you have to do to the Na'Vi team that had Simple on it to have a chance to beat him?
I think we kind of just understood their psychology of how they approach the game. Just especially just having Sasha as a teammate, it's just kind of, you understand individually like how he approaches the game. Like if they start losing, he's going to be more desperate. He's going to start doing these specific kind of plays that he likes to do. And everyone obviously studies Simple as a player. We all know how insane he can be and how impactful he can be. So I think on my team, we just understood within a certain parameter, like what plays he can possibly do in like X round. And we just play against that. And they got pretty close to the Cologne final, I would say, or not final, but in Cologne they're in the Grand Slam for sure. They should have actually beat us. So it's actually like another what if question. But he kind of threw and tried the knife. And I think I personally feel like he kind of had a mental block versus my teams. So we kind of just used that against him and used it for our benefit. And we would always just be like, yeah, Simple chokes versus us. Like, let's just play our game. And we just generally had a really good read on how Na'Vi plays the game.
By the way, that was the other side of this, because people will actually have seen this in the career of Carrigan, because obviously he's won loads since then, and now the joke in his team is the mega clutch, like they win all the bloody close games. It's like the opposite concept of what I said about if you do the choke. It's like eventually if you're the ones winning every tournament, and every time you're even facing elimination, you just always come back and win an OT. Eventually it's like you guys start to think, now we're going to do it. Like, of course he's going to win a round, I'm going to win a round. And the opponent also starts thinking they never lose.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of the Vitality match where they were up like 14-1 on us on overpass and we came back and won. it's like, damn, it feels good to be in this spot.
Exactly. Right. When you did go to that major, obviously, the worst part, obviously, isn't even just losing. It's having to fucking lose to Astralis. So it's like, oh, bloody hell, that story's like, right. Everyone's going to edit out this part here and then just go, oh, it was just Astralis the whole time. I remember some guy, I won't mention his name, even had the gall when they won that major to go, did the Astralis era ever end? And I was like, did you miss where that team won like 6 tournaments in a row? So what the hell are you talking about? Like, yeah, then did you idiot? Like, look, they won another one. Props. Mad props to them. They're amazing. Right? When you look back on that, is it as simple? Like, yes, obviously there was the thing with the player break, and then there was that weird thing where they did the vertigo veto inexplicably that no one could ever have predicted. But because obviously here's the problem with it. I've noticed in Counter-Strike, fans always act like when the result is finished, that was the only result that ever could have happened. It was always going to go that way. They forget how many million variables there are in a match. You know, there's a pistol, you win or you don't lose. That changes how the first part of the game goes. If you win or lose map 1, it changes how you play on map 2. There's a million factors, right?
Yeah.
Is that one of those ones where, would they actually have beat you on any other day if you played that match? Was it a one-off? How generous are you to them for that win?
Hard to say. I remember when they picked Vertigo, it wasn't like that big of a deal to us. It was kind of just like a surprise. But then we're just like, we talked about it and we're just like, oh, like we still feel like we're like the best team of Vertigo right now anyway, if they want to pick it, because our confidence was super high at that point.
I think you never lost on it.
Yeah, so we're super confident going into it, but obviously they had a good game plan going in.
Yeah.
And I feel like if we were to play them again at that time, it would be a different result. Obviously, like in hindsight, you can say like if we rewatch our game, then we would have a better game plan. But I think they just had a very smart veto going into it. And yeah, we did get caught off guard a little bit, but we were still very confident within ourselves and within our own map pool that we could still win. But I don't know, it's hard to say. I do think they played really well.
By the way, look, it's an easy question, but I'll ask it anyway, since you were the ones playing them. Are they the best lineup ever in CSGO?
Yes, they have to be. I can't think of any other team. I mean, you could say NIP, but like there wasn't even like salaries back then, so it's hard to even like have that same discussion with that team. But like the NIP stuff just seems crazy to me. It's like 80 wins in a row or something. Like something's wrong.
It's true. That's
yeah,
true.
I mean, I think just with how consistent they were over that time period, there's no other team that I can think of that's come close.
Right. Obviously, after this was all the period where it's like you still had some times where you came second to Astralis, or you lost to them in the semis, etc., etc. Right. One of the annoying things about this era is, in the past, you could sometimes lose to Astralis in 2-0. Like, if people don't know, the 2018 one was way better. That was where they would beat even great teams like 16-8, 16-6, and on your map, and you'd just be like, fuck, if they're going to beat us like that, like, yeah, you win. This is the one where it would always be like 3 maps, or you'd win a map, and you think, hey, we're in the series. Like, did you actually feel like this was like a rivalry, right? It wasn't just them winning every time, even though they did win the matches.
Oh, yeah, it was definitely a rivalry for sure. It's not like they were blowing us out every match either. It was always, not always, but it was usually a 3-mapper. It's like, all right, we did good here. Next time we'll be better, and then we do worse the next time, and then we do better, even better the next time we play them. So it's always like, is today the day where we're finally going to beat these guys? And I believe the nuke pick just screwed us so much because they just were so good on the map. They were like even better than us, and we were like really good on the map, I feel.
What made them so unbeatable on that map, do you think?
It just felt like they always knew what we were doing, like on our T sides especially, and they had a very strong upper. And I think we relied a lot on our upper execs and upper contacts to win nuke, and they just had really strong upper players at the time. And then Device obviously was just so annoying to play against. He was always in the right spot where we were going, and anytime we try to use secret, he was there, and he would just kill us like for free basically. So it was just a lot of things. I think they were reading our game really well.
I've been pleasantly surprised during the time I've had my Patreon and my Patreon community, the Skrilluminati, by both the financial support they've provided and the moral support. And so this video was kindly supported and made possible by Starlust, Theo Buenzelli, Ahmed Haju, Matt Pugnaccio Racula, Toucan, Jensen Go, Animosity, Tobias Bernasconi, Bot Pounder 420, Yurka 86, Tosh, and as always, you know it, a special thanks goes out to my main man, Jerky's Minion. Would you like to ask a question in one of those AMAs where I tend to go pretty in depth? Sometimes they even spin out into their own videos. Do you want teasers to find out who the upcoming guests are for the myriad of interviews that I do across esports? Maybe you want to suggest a topic or a guest? We have a channel on my Discord where you can do that if you're at the right tier. And of course, you could potentially take part in one of those lengthy esports discussions with me about whatever is on your mind in the scene. Well, if any of those perks sound tantalizing, put your money where your mouth is and join the Skrilluminati today via the Patreon link in the description box below.